You've probably heard the phrase, nothing is created, everything is copied. And honestly, it's true. Nothing is made from scratch. There's always some kind of inspiration in the mix. That applies to cartoons too, which are constantly borrowing ideas from each other, but every now and then things go too far, and some animations turn into full-on rip-offs. Bluey knows firsthand what it's like to be the target of a rip-off. While the little blue dog was heavily inspired by Peppa Pig, the show managed to grow into something unique and original. Unfortunately, we can't say the same for Chip-Chilla, an animated series from the United States that's weirdly similar to Bluey in a lot of ways. The show is about Chip and his chinchilla family. He and his siblings are always playing together and learning important life lessons, just like in Bluey. So far, you might think the American and Australian shows just share some common traits with other kids' cartoons, but visually, Chip-Chilla copies Bluey almost frame by frame. Both main characters are blue animals, which is already a little too much of a coincidence. And to top it off, the Chilla family's house looks a lot like the Heeler family's home. Some would even say they're identical. With all these similarities, it's pretty obvious we're looking at a ripoff with zero shame. You'll find tons of people pointing this out online if you look up Chip-Chilla, along with plenty of negative reviews criticizing it for being so unoriginal. The show just couldn't draw inspiration from Bluey and turn it into something fresh, which is a shame. But this is just the first of the 9 bizarre cartoon ripoffs you probably never knew existed. So hop on board. Cinewave is starting now. Not every cartoon copy is actually a cartoon. Sometimes companies decide to clone a show by turning it into a mobile game. That's exactly the case with Hippo, a game where you take care of little animal kids. The main character is a hippo, but his design looks a lot like Peppa's. He could have been a regular gray hippo like most others, but they chose to make him pink. On purpose, just to make the connection to the famous pig impossible to ignore. And sure enough, tons of kids ended up downloading the app thinking it's an official Peppa Pig game. The other characters also look suspiciously familiar. There's even one who looks exactly like Candy Cat. Just like Chip-Chilla, the backgrounds in this game are nearly identical to the ones in Peppa Pig. The houses are spot-on copies. Combine that with an animation style that clearly tries to mimic Peppa's, and it becomes pretty hard to deny this is a blatant ripoff. SpongeBob SquarePants is Nickelodeon's biggest hit, and of course it was only a matter of time before someone tried to rip it off. In fact, it's already happened more than once. But today we're going to focus on one of the boldest examples, Bobby and Bobo, Iran's knockoff version of SpongeBob, released as a series of movies. This case is about as extreme as it gets. The characters are basically identical. The only real change is that Bobby and Bobo, clearly SpongeBob and Patrick, are a bit rounder. Other than that, the backgrounds and even the personalities are exactly the same. And the animation? It's honestly terrible, except for the scenes that directly copy moments from the original show. That's probably because the animators literally traced over SpongeBob scenes to create their own. Want to know the worst part? In the early movies of this so-called franchise, they didn't even try to hide the plagiarism. The characters had their original names and appearances. It was literally unofficial SpongeBob movies, plain and simple. Only later did they tweak things slightly to make it seem like something new, but let's be honest, the ripoff is still super obvious. By the way, are you a SpongeBob fan too? If so, drop a hashtag Sponge down in the comments. One of the countries with the most cases of media plagiarism is, without a doubt, China. The main reason for that is how strict the country is when it comes to importing entertainment from abroad. China often censors or even bans international content altogether. Because of that, it's developed a habit of creating its own versions of pretty much everything, including the amazing world of Gumball. The hit Cartoon Network show couldn't escape getting its own Asian knockoff, called Miracle Star, starring a goat boy named Kiki and his pet frog, Quack. You might already notice some shady similarities, but wait until you see Kiki's dad. He looks exactly like Richard Watterson from Gumball. This show was actually created as an advertisement for a goat milk brand, also called Miracle Star, and the whole plagiarism controversy made it all the way back to the creators of Gumball. In fact, the Cartoon Network team responded in the best possible way. They released a brilliant episode where the Wattersons meet parodies of the Miracle Star characters and have to deal with them copying everything they do. It was a hilarious roast from Cartoon Network, no doubt. The Simpsons have parodied just about everything over the course of their 700+ episodes, but always in a satirical way, not as straight up copying. That's what makes it extra iconic that the Simpsons themselves ended up being the target of a blatant ripoff. Meet the Samsonadzes, the Georgian version of the famous Yellow family. Yep, it's another cartoon about a traditional yellow-skinned household, but instead of poking fun at American life, this one pokes fun at Georgian culture. The characters look extremely similar, with just a few small tweaks. There's a dad who's basically Homer, but with hair. A son who's just like Bart, but bald, go figure. a daughter like Lisa, except she's flirty instead of nerdy, and finally a mom who resembles Marge, just without the blue hair and with a lot more makeup. To be fair, the show does deliver some surprisingly deep social commentary, maybe even more complex than The Simpsons in some ways. And the best part? They've got a pet parrot. Still, that's not enough to hide the fact that it's a shameless clone. Lucky Pie is yet another case of a Chinese animation that looks way too much like an American show. This time the victim is Adventure Time. Both shows take place in wacky fantasy worlds filled with bizarre creatures, even people made out of food. Also, both stories are led by a boy and his talking animal sidekick, Finn and his magical dog Jake in Adventure Time, and Ah Pai and his talking horse Lucky in the Chinese version. The animation styles are so similar, it's hard to believe it's just a coincidence. But this case is a little different from Miracle Star. While Gumball's copycat came from a big company, Lucky Pie was actually made by a small group of independent artists who crowdfunded the project to bring it to life. Chances are they're just huge Adventure Time fans and wanted to create something in that same spirit. So even though the result ended up looking a little too much like Finn and Jake's show, it wasn't done with bad intentions. Pretty wild to uncover these things about your favorite cartoons, right? So don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss our daily videos.
I love it!
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is still a hit to this day, but its animated series was one of the biggest kid shows of the 1980s, and because of that, tons of other cartoons in a similar style popped up around the same time. One show that took that inspiration way too far is Street Sharks. While Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles follows 4 turtles who act like humans and fight crime, Street Sharks does pretty much the exact same thing, just with 4 sharks. The differences are in the small details, like the fact that in this case, the heroes are teenagers who got turned into ocean predators, while the Ninja Turtles started off as regular turtles that mutated and became human-like. That said, the sharks are also into extreme sports, just like the turtles. While the original crew rides skateboards, the sharks ride motorcycles. A group of teenagers solving mysteries alongside a talking dog who's scared of everything? Sounds like Scooby-Doo, right? Nope, this is actually the plot of Goober and the Ghost Chasers. And yeah, it's easy to get confused because both shows are super similar, except Goober came out in 1973 while Scooby-Doo debuted in 1969. In other words, the lesser-known show is the one doing the copying here. Like Street Sharks, Goober has some small differences. For example, while most of Scooby-Doo's supernatural stuff turns out to be fake, usually some greedy villain in disguise, the Goober Gang actually deals with real ghosts all the time. And the dog Goober can even turn invisible when he's scared. But here's the funniest part of this whole story. This ripoff was made by the same studio that created Scooby-Doo, Hanna-Barbera. Basically, Scooby-Doo was such a hit that the studio tried to pump out a bunch of similar shows hoping to catch lightning in a bottle again. As you can probably guess, none of them ever came close to matching Scooby's success. Batman's had plenty of animated versions over the years, but the character originally came from comic books way back in 1939. Then in 1979, South Korea released an animated movie with its own unofficial version of The Dark Knight, Golden Batman. Yep, it's Batman, except he's gold and has insane superpowers. The guy can fly and shoot lasers. Basically, he's Superman in a cape and a cowl. Sorry, Bruce Wayne, but here's the craziest part of the story. There's a plot twist. Golden Batman technically came before Batman. That's because the Korean film was an adaptation of an old Japanese comic book hero named Golden Bat, created all the way back in 1931, years before either Batman or Superman ever existed. In fact, many consider him the first superhero ever. At the very least, he's one of the first. Wait a second, does that mean Batman is actually a ripoff of a Japanese character? As wild as that sounds, that's not what happened. Golden Bat had nothing in common with the Dark Knight. He wore a skull-shaped mask instead of a bat one, and as we mentioned, he had powers. The real confusion came from the Korean movie, which turned Golden Bat into Golden Batman, a blatant copy of DC's Gotham City Protector. So basically, South Korea had the chance to make a movie about one of the earliest superheroes in history, maybe the earliest, and instead chose to rebrand him into a Batman knockoff just to grab attention. And let's be honest, they totally tricked some fans into thinking it was actually related to DC Comics. What a terrible move, huh? Still in the mood for more fun? Then go ahead and click on one of the 2 videos we left on your screen. Thanks for watching, and see you next time!